President Ramaphosa says government has passed laws to strengthen the fight against gender-based violence. He says these laws will offer greater protection to victims of domestic violence. The president was speaking at the National Women's Day event in Richmond in KwaZulu-Natal Midlands today.
Celebrating the advancement and achievement of women in South Africa, thousands of women from across the province gathered to commemorate the Women's March of 1956 and to reflect on and celebrate the strides made by women from all walks of life. Though women continue to break the barriers, they still face many challenges, from patriarchy to poverty and gender-based violence, which government has called a second pandemic.
Like wear what they want and say what they want to say and voice themselves. Yeah, women can't do that without being judged, looked at, harassed, even sex remarked. And
she says there is high volumes of crime in her area. She says they are lacking job opportunities as women and that there is poor road infrastructure. She wants government to address their challenges. Political leaders say men have a responsibility to protect women and children.
On this important occasion, we wish to make an impassioned clarion call to all the good men of our province and our country to take a lead in the fight against the scourge of the gender-based violence and femicide.
President Ramaphosa hailed women as champions, saying that many are now leading in positions in various fields, noting women in parliament, the judiciary and sports.
So our young women today can be stars, they can be judges. The door is open. They can be members of parliament. They can be businessmen and businesswomen rather, and they can be entrepreneurs.
The Medical Research Council has found that 150 reported cases of rape, 30 end up in court, and only 10 perpetrators are sentenced. Ramaphosa has reaffirmed government's commitment to protect victims of violence.
The new laws empower the police to enter premises without a warrant and, if necessary, to arrest a suspect without a warrant. Police can also remove dangerous weapons from a suspect. Complainants will be able to apply for protection, a protection order online. Uye ku-internet uma unomuntu okuhluphayo wesilisa uthole i-protection order even online.
The second presidential summit on gender-based violence and femicide will take place in November. Ramaphosa says it's where government will assess its interventions. Vusi Kumalo, SABC News, Richmond.
Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu is a senior lecturer at the Wits School of Governance. He joins us now for more on the plight of women, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, to just look at some of what they have to contend with. A very good evening to you, Dr. Ndlovu, and thank you so much for speaking to us. I suppose what comes to mind in terms of recent events for the province, one is a very positive development, that is women leadership at the helm of governance structures. Two, sadly, has been the spectre of climatic conditions that have led to devastating heavy rains and floods for largely women and girl children in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of looking at the population demographics.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners. And I would say happy Women's Day to you, discussing some of these important issues today, especially reflecting on the devastating floods of KZN, but also reflecting on questions of leadership. Those are some of the key issues that as we commemorate this day, this month, we always have to interrogate. But the unfortunate part is that we only get to do it today and this month, and then we default to our everyday, setup. But I think the work is coming through in terms of pushing, especially for leadership. So, of course, these are not the most transformative structures of our society that we're looking at today, but we can confidently say there is progress in terms of, moving into these spaces and seeing women, taking up these important spaces, of which we hope that one day they will use these, the power that they have and their position with so much carefulness and consideration of the broader agenda that they carry for women across the country and across the globe.
Now, we know that there was a census lately, and that really gives us a sense of statistically what we're dealing with population-wise in terms of size of women in KwaZulu-Natal, ages, income and education, etc. Are you able to just give us a brief overview if we're looking specifically at KwaZulu-Natal today?
So I'm not an aspect of KwaZulu-Natal to say, so I don't have the exact statistics in terms of what are the demographics on the ground, but what I can comment on is that the reflection of the statistics that are on the ground in KwaZulu-Natal are a reflection of broader statistics across the country in terms of women's participation in these spaces, but also in terms of how women are positioned in disadvantaged positions, so much that when we experience some of these challenges, women are always at the forefront of these struggles.
All right. So maybe let's just look at general statistics. I mean, the issue of gender-based violence obviously at the forefront of everyone's minds, including femicide, given recent events. I saw, in fact, a very apt headline in one of the weekend newspapers saying, "No country for women." And now the president today is saying that there's going to be another summit on the back of the 2019 National Gender Summit, of which the criticism has been the lack of implementation of the resolutions of this. Are we continuing to pay lip service to what is a gigantic problem? And are our leaders tone deaf, listening to our police minister talk about the rape in KwaZulu-Natal, describing it as even male dogs don't do to female dogs what these people have done? Couching it in that way, I must say I was rather taken aback.
Well, I think it's the everyday language that we see being used by these officials. Right as in the day before yesterday, Minister Begitele said one woman was lucky, if that is lucky, to be raped by one man when Indeed. Others were being raped by a group
Multiple
of men.
Yes.
What does it even mean to be lucky to be raped by this one person? And also even the language that is being used, it shows that there is a lack of conscientization even amongst our leaders. There's a lack of understanding the depth of the struggle of gender-based violence and femicide in this country. Not only, on the everyday interactions on the streets, but from the leadership itself. So now we're going for another summit, but have we taken stock of how far we've come with the previous summit? What is it that we've implemented from the previous summit? Where are we in terms of making progress towards eradicating gender-based violence and femicide? And because even if you look at the state capture, we are a country that relies largely on a series of special committees, special commissions and all of that, but at the same time knowing that they do not have the implementing authority, the implementing power, they can only go as far as recommending. What is the use of those recommendations if they are not going to be implemented, if they're not going, to achieve any concrete change within our communities. So gender-based violence continues to be a pandemic in this country and globally, and it will continue as long as the government is not taking necessary measures, as long as the government is not taking any accountability to some of the policies that it proposes, to some of the recommendations that it makes, to some of the recommendations that even come from special, committees. So that on its own is really, really, really problematic, and we still have a long way to go.
I want to look at the fact that South Africa has an actual ministry that is supposed to deal with issues around women, and the criticism has been that it's being lumped together not only with children but also people with disabilities, saying that there's a lack of focus. And when we look at the constituencies, the structures thereof, if we're talking about having quality leadership that understands these issues, that is capacitated to implement the policy directives in tackling the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, what seems to be the problem? Are we not also investing enough? I was just looking at the IEC figures in terms of the reported number of councillors that were elected, 63% of which were men, 37% were female councillors. So obviously there's inequity in that as well in terms of the grassroots intervention levels.
Of course, there is a gap in terms of equity, but also looking at these specialized units and in terms of what they stand for. Because I think the mistake that we tend to do is to put a woman in this one space and then believe that just by putting a woman's face, we're going to transform these structures, forgetting that there is a lot of work and background work that needs to be done in terms of, facilitating transformation. Best of all, are these structures even well-resourced? So if you're having a ministry that's looking for people living with disabilities, that's looking at children, and that's looking at women, these challenges are all different, and they are not homogeneous in any sense. So you cannot lump them together and expect one ministry to tackle them, because also these are three different groups that are highly, highly marginalized in society, suffering from different challenges. So lumping them together really does not solve the cause, because then what happens is that as much as you are trying to win this one side of the struggle, the other one also demands your attention. But most importantly, to set up a structure, to set up a ministry, and then to not capacitate it in terms of human capacity on one hand, but also on the other hand in terms of resources that are needed to transform these societies. What is the relationship between the ministry and the judiciary structure? For instance, in this country, what is the relationship between the ministry and the police services in making sure that even just one strand of those three different groupings are being catered for? Okay. So I think there is a challenge there. We need to rethink this whole system, and if we are to transform it, we need to really, really invest in terms of human resources, but also in terms of some financial resources and other different resources that we can put into that ministry to make sure.
I do apologize for stopping you and ending our discussion. As you said, unfortunately, it's a seasonal discussion. We have it once a year, and it's almost like with that celebratory, obligatory nature. Thank you so much, though, for your time and insights. Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu is a senior lecturer at the Wits School of Governance, reflecting on the challenges that women in this country face. We'll continue looking at some of the various challenges and the solutions in place that governments and civil society are suggesting, whether or not they are working, including how women are faring. Okay, we're going